Hi, today we are going to start the first blind 75 problem. So let's go ahead and read the question. 217 contain duplicate. Given an integer nums, return true if any value appears at least twice in the array, and return false if every element is distinct. So now I'm gonna first time in an interview, you have to keep the interviewer informed. So after the problem, you can say, so here I pick one example. I say, all right, let me reread the problem description to see if I have any question. So the problem here is we are given an integer array. An array. So let's say we are given. Actually, let me just write down a. Okay, so we are given an array, and now we need to check whether there is duplicate. True if any duplicate, and then false otherwise. Right. So now I would like to ask some clarifying questions. May I ask a few clarifying questions? Can I assume that the array is not empty? And if we look at here, it says, yeah, so constraints, it says that the nums line is at least 1 and at most 10 to the power of 5. So we just write it down here. Nums length is within 1 to, it's between 1 to 10 to the power of 5. And then, let's say if we and then the second step is you say that you understand the problem and you need some time to think. So I'm gonna say, I think I understand the problem now. Let me think about possible approaches. So the first part, no. So the approach. Wait, let me think. Anyway, let me just think for a moment to see if there's any clarifying questions that I need to go through. Right. So maybe the time, maybe. How about I go through an example problem? So let's say we are given 1, 2, 3. And here we see that there are no duplicates. So it means we return false. But if we are given 1, 2, 1, then we see that 1 is a duplicate. So we return true. So here, I think I got an idea. So we want to see if a value appear before, then we just return true. But then let's say we got through the end, we got through all the array elements, and we see that none of the values appear before, then in this case we can return false. So if we go to say this example here, we have 1, 2, 3, and we got at first 1, and then we go through 2, and then we see that we haven't had 2 yet, so there's no duplicate so far, but then there is still elements after this index. So we go through the next one, which is 3, and we see that 3 has not appeared before. And at this point, we have run through the whole array, which means that there is no duplicate so far, and we have reached the end. Then satisfy the condition where the array has no duplicate. And in the second example, when we go to the first one, it's 1, but then we haven't seen anything yet. So 1 is unique. And then the second element is 2, which is also unique because the first one is 1, and we haven't seen 2 before. In the next one, in the next element, when we check the next element, which is 1, it turns out that we have seen 1 before. In this case, this 1 is a duplicate. And in here we can see that once we found a duplicate, we don't need to go through the rest of the array because the duplicate exists. At this point, there is already we have already found a duplicate, which means that there is no point to go through the whole array to see if it is a duplicate or not. So this means that we can terminate early, and we can save some of the computation complexity here. So just 2 steps. That's is sound. And then the third step that we want to do is we ask the interviewer to see if there is any feedback or any any optimization that we can do at this point. Actually, let me change the layout here. See if there is a dark mode. Oh, actually, it's the dark mode already. Yep. Anyway, yep. So the third step is we want to ask, does this sound reasonable to you? And then the interviewer let's say yes, sounds good. And then you need to tell the interviewer that you are beginning to work on the implementation. So I would say something like, I would like to start implementing this unless you would like me to explore further optimizations. Then let's say the interviewer say that, oh, it's good enough, go through, good to go ahead. And then right, and then I will explain. So first of all, I'm going to create, actually, let's see what we have here in Python 3 in LeetCode. Okay, so I'm going to say, let's say we create a function for this. Define contains duplicate. Then there will be a nums, and the function will receive the array itself. So yeah, let's call it nums here. Now let's go through the steps that I'm gonna present this. So in order to check if there is a duplicate or not, we are going to need a dictionary, right? So I'm gonna call it found. Actually, in this problem, we don't need to count how many occurrences. We just need to check whether it exists or if we have found it before. So all we need is just a hash set. So let's create a hash set called found. And then we initialize it to an empty state. Of course, it's empty because we haven't seen anything yet. And then now we are going to go through all the elements in the array to see if there's any duplicate. So here I'm gonna use a for loop. For I'll call it element or item in nums, and inside I'm gonna check if it exists in the found, if we have seen it before, if we have found it before. Actually, let me just call it seen here. So seen, seen. So I'm gonna check if item is in scene. I think in Python we don't use this here, so it just if item in scene, which means that you have seen it before, then we return true. Otherwise, we return false. Actually, otherwise, if there is the element, then we need to add it into our scene set, which means that we can call a scene dot add, and then we add the item into it, and then in the next one it will keep on checking. But in case we finish all the, we run through all the elements and we haven't seen anything duplicate yet, which means that there are no duplicate. And, if we go through all the elements in the array and none of them have been added previously before we reach that, before we get to that element, then this means that there's no duplicate, so we just return false. Right. Alright, so in the next step, we need to see after you finish coding, you need to go through some examples. So I'm gonna say, all right, let me quickly walk through the code to make sure I haven't missed anything. So in here, I create a function that receives the array, and then I will create a scene set which we store all the elements that we have seen before, and then it's like a memory in here. So, you can think of it as a internal memory here. And then we will go through all the arrays elements one by one and see if we have seen that before. If we have not seen that, then we add it into our scene set. Otherwise, if we have seen it, then we just return it true, which is I am doing here. First of all, I check if we have seen it before. If it is the case, then we return true. Then we return true, meaning that we have seen a duplicate element. Otherwise, we just go ahead and then add it into our scene set, so that the next time we see this number, we can return true because we have seen a duplicate. At the end of the array, if we finally reach the point where there is no duplicate, then we just return false, which means that we have gone through all the array elements and we haven't seen any duplicate number. So if I go to some of the examples that I have come up here, 1 2 1, first of all the scene set is empty, and then I got 1 here, so I'm gonna scene equals, initially it's empty, and then when I got through the first element, which is 1, I will have check if the 1 is in the scene, which is not, and then I go ahead and then add the item into our scene set. So now I have 1, and then the next step, I have 2 is not in the scene, I add it into our scene set, And then the same for 3, I add it into our scene set because we haven't seen it. In the end, I just return a false, which sounds correct to me. And then in the second example that I have here, I'm gonna run through the same algorithm. So initially we have 1, then we have 2, and then once we check 1 again, we have seen it before. So it just directly return true. And this is yeah. At this stage, I am pretty confident that the solutions work. So the next step, the next thing that I'm gonna tell the interviewer is that actually I was doing the 8th step here, so which means that I should have said, now let me test the code with this input to make sure it works as intended. The first example is this, second example is this. Okay, I missed that. I miss telling the interviewer the stage that I'm in right now. So let's move on to the 9th step here. By running the input, focus on the important variable, and here the array is initialized. I did that, yeah. Because the condition is satisfied. Well, there's a good place here. It says the loop and then return to result. And then the last step after thoroughly checking your code is to say, I think this code should work. Should work. Yep. And then let's just try input our solutions into here via the LeetCode platform. So scene equals set, and then we run to for item in mouse if item in scene return true, and then at the end I just return false. So let's run through some test code. Seems not right. Oh, okay, I forgot to do the most important part. Scene dot edge item. Yep, let's run through it again. Accepted. And then case 2 accepted, case 3 is also accepted. So let's submit this. So let's go ahead and submit this thing. Yep, so we see that we have an accepted answer. It beats 55%. Interesting. There's a way to analyze the complexity. It's quite unique. I haven't seen this before. Oh, and okay. Alright, I forgot the most important part. So let's check the complexity in here. It's just one simple loop, so that is OM. And the space complexity at the end, I would have added an item if it is not duplicate. If there is no duplicate, it doesn't contain duplicate, then I will end up adding all the elements into the set, which means ON as well. I think that concludes our interview practice today. Thank you.